Good evening, Suchitra garu. Welcome to Harshaniyam.
Good evening.
Childhood and student life. Can you tell us how it impacted your literary journey?
I was born in Madras. It was not called Chennai then. My mother was a reader, so I think I kind of inherited the love of reading from her, and I was reading very early in life. But then my father was in a job where we had to move a lot, so I spent part of my childhood in Chennai and then in Madurai, and then we spent actually a part of it in Vijayawada and Hyderabad. I was in Vijayawada for a year and Hyderabad for half a year. I think what that did was to expose me to languages and cultures sort of outside in the Tamil Nadu, but also even within Tamil Nadu, so many different kinds of cultural elements. In Chennai, where I grew up, the temple culture and the sort of bhakti literature I was exposed to was very different from what I saw in Madurai. So the various influences, I think, to some extent, they shape my understanding of my surroundings, I should say. So this was on one level, right? This is how your immediate culture affects you. But also, I was reading a lot, basically spending a lot of time in the library, reading European literature. The books came out of America and so on. So I think that having sort of both of these influences, being able to travel in India and reading extensively, I think both of that shaped me as a reader and shaped me as somebody curious about understanding other people.
Then you moved to USA, right?
Yeah, so in 2009, I finished my college and I moved to Pittsburgh for a PhD. I did a PhD in biology. And yeah, it was at that time I actually started reading more of Indian literature because up until then, till I was in college, I was actually trying to, I was reading Kafka, I was reading Dostoevsky, writers like that, who are very popular even today among the college reading, sort of serious reading crowd. But I didn't know, for example, that there was a vibrant literature in Tamil. And I was not reading so deeply in Tamil. So it was only when I went to the US that I slowly started discovering these authors and I was able to spend some time and read them. So modern Tamil literature is only 100 years old, but it has produced many sort of excellent kinds of writers. Like I said, the first sort of serious Tamil literary work that I read was, I suppose it was Ashokamitran's Padinetavadu Achakkodu. In English, it has come out as the 18th Parallel. Ashokamitran is perhaps one of the finest writers that Tamil language has produced, one of the finest writers to write out of, to write anywhere in the world. He writes about very ordinary things, about the lives of very short periods of time, a day in the life of an ordinary man, or even 5 minutes in the life of an office going person. And in that, he's able to show so much understanding about the human condition, and so much there's so much empathy that you see in that short span that he's recording. So he's a master of the short story. But this 18th Parallel is a novel, which is interestingly, it is set in Hyderabad during the time of when Hyderabad was it became part of India in 1947. So this sort of set the tone for me. So apart from Ashokamitran, I think the writers who I really like in Tamil are Jayakandan and K. Rajanarayanan. Kira is again somebody who I think what I really enjoyed about Kira when I discovered him was how rooted his metaphors were in the landscape that he came from. I really enjoyed reading world literature, and I think when I discovered Ashokamitran, I saw that this is not just something which exists out there in the world. This exists in a language that I actually speak at home. So that was what I understood. When I discovered Kira, it was after a time that I had spent in Madurai, where I had just the landscape around me, the people around me. It had become a part of me, but I realized that I didn't know anything more about it. Landscape has its own stories, that the land and when people interact with the land, they have they have certain wisdoms that they come to understand, that you also like, kind of you know it within yourself. I don't know if I'm being too vague, but when you are part of a land, when the land has become a part of you, there are things you understand, but you don't know how to put voice to it. So Kirajan Narayanan, he tells you how about those things. So he taps into folk tales, he taps into mythology, and he's able to give voice to those things. So he's a master in that regard. And in the generation after that, I think Jeyamohan is a big influence. I really enjoy his writing, and I think he's head and shoulders above anyone else writing today.
We will come to that. We will come to that. When did you start translating from Tamil
So
into
I think it
English?
was a general sort of a progressive journey. I started as a reader. Like I said, I was reading when I was very, very young, and I kept reading. And of course, like any reader does, at some point you start to try your hand at writing. You have fancies that you are a writer. And I mean, I had a very strong feeling that I was a writer ever since I was 12, 13 years old. So I've constantly been writing something or the other. Whether it was good or not, I would write. Things have gotten published, but whatever. Then when until I was 19, 20, I wrote, and then I realized that this is not what I want to write. I don't have any craft, or this is I need to do something more to actually become a writer. So maybe I'll not write for some time, let me just read. And I started to read a lot. So this is what I told you. This all this happened in parallel to my sort of professional journey, like growing up in Madurai and then coming to the US. Uh, all this happened parallelly. Then, as I was reading, I realized that I wanted to read more of Indian literature, not just in Tamil. I wanted to read, because at that point, I think I read S.L. Bhairappa's Parva. I read it in English translation, and I know the translation was not great. It gave me a sense of the novel, but I didn't particularly draw me. Interestingly, a lot of the novels that I read in translation during that period were based on the Mahabharata. I think that tradition is very strong in Indian languages. One novel that I remember reading it during that years that took my breath away was M.T. Vasudevan Nayar's novel called The Randamulam. The second turn, it was Mahabharata from Bhiman's point of view. Uh, and I mean, it was when I read it, I think I was 21 or 22, and the way he had treated the Mahabharata, and gave in the end, it actually comes to a very earthly understanding of events in the Mahabharata, and you come to understand Bhiman's sort of great sacrifice and so on. So things like that. So those were. Till then I had only thought of the Mahabharata as some kind of a sacred story or something that old women talked about in the house. But I didn't know that it had so much of psychological and the potential to say something so deep. So then I realized I wanted to read a lot of literature that were written by authors who wrote in non-English Indian languages. So then I started the journey as a reader, I think. And then eventually, when I realized that many of the translations I was reading was not great, I felt maybe I can do a better job. Maybe I can try one or two stories. I tried that. I mean, and also translation is a way to understand the text better. So in Tamil, when I started reading old Tamil literature, ancient Tamil literature, I had a small notebook where it was like a dictionary. So I would write down painstakingly the names of the new words that I was discovering in Sangha Tamil, Kelir, words like that. So the words that I didn't, that is not a part of the normal conversation, but it comes often in the poetry. I had this. Then eventually that became translating the poem, and then whether I could translate the poetry in the poem. So that is how it started. And then I translated a short story which won a prize, and then I felt, okay, maybe this is something I can do after all. That's how it happened.
That story is again Jeyamohan's, I believe.
Yeah. This was in 20. That story was published in 2017. It is called Periyamma's Words. It's by Jeyamohan. Yes.
How did this particular book land in your hands for translation?
So this happened because so I mean after I had published a more short story, I translated some more of his short stories, tried to place them in different magazines and things like that, and eventually I thought maybe I'll start working on a full length work. and I was working on a full length work, and I'd sent parts of that to some friends, and somehow one of those excerpts, they landed in R. Muthulingam sir's mailbox. That, and R. Muthulingam is another giant of a master of a writer from Tamil. Another of my favorite writers. I forgot to mention him in my in my earlier answer. So he's based out of Canada. He has a very fine sensibility, and I think he is very keen on seeing Tamil literature being translated and read by readers worldwide. That sort of I think that mission is sort of part of his aims, and so he got in touch with me, and I was just thrilled to even talk to him. And when he said, I would like you to translate this novel, I said, I mean, it's a great honor and privilege that you are considering that my name as a translator for such a great novel, but I don't know if I can do it. It's because a very difficult novel. It's also in dialect, and I don't know if I understand that language deep enough to do justice to it. I'll think about it, I said. I was also a little bit worried because at that time, I had read Ezham Ulagam a very long time back in 2015, and at that point, I found it a disturbing novel. It was something I couldn't, I didn't know if I could really finish translating the novel in a short span of time. So I thought I'd read it again and then decide. So I did that. So I took some time and I read the novel in a couple of days. But at that time in 2021, when Muthulingam sir asked me, when I read the novel, uh, I was, it was, I think that I had also maybe grown as a reader by then, and the novel just opened up, and I knew, okay, no, this is something I have to face to the challenge of doing this. This is a brilliant novel, and something that needs to be out there. So then I decided I would do it. Yeah.
Tell us a bit about Jeyamohan the writer and what his work means to you as a reader.
So I think see, I wouldn't say that all writers are for all readers. There is people have different sensibilities. People have different demands of what they want out of the literature and all that. But I personally started reading, especially after my late teens. I started reading. Not just as a way to occupy my time, or as a distraction, or because I wanted to sort of live in another universe for some time, things like that. I think for me reading was a very sort of a very personal quest. I was reading authors, I mean, for me, my favorite authors when I was a late teenager was people like Dostoevsky, Hermann Hesse, Kazantzakis, because I think for me, I had very fundamental questions that came from my relationship with religion, my understanding or questions about the world around me, and what I was doing in this world, what I wanted out of life, things like that, death, the big questions. So that, and literature is pretty much the last bastion there, because if you have questions about organized religion, and where do you turn to? You go to the poets, you go to the 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 literary masters. That is whom you can talk to. So that strain I always had in me, and I think that is kind of what drove my reading, and which is what I think also distanced me from a lot of contemporary literature, because I think in contemporary life we are slowly moving away from that sort of a mentality, or maybe it's not foregrounded so much in contemporary literary discourse. So my ideal writers have always been people who wrote in the 18th or 19th century, like who wrote big novels. Tolstoy is a great favorite for me now. George Eliot is another writer that I can always read, go back to. So people like that, So I think for me that is the kind of writer who with whom I feel uh, I can talk to, I can discourse with. So that is how I discovered Jeyamohan, and like I said, this book called Purappadu, where he leaves home after the death of a friend, and he goes all around India, and it's a travelogue. It's like but it's not, it's not strictly speaking a travelogue. It's also fictionalized. It's seeing his travels through the eyes of a person who has this loss and these questions, and who's undergoing this this tremendous journey in the heartland of India, but also in his own, somewhere inside him also this journey is happening. So this, when you read something like that, I think you realize, okay, this author, he has something uh, useful to, or interesting to tell you, if you care to understand him more. So then I started reading more of his works, and his major novel Vishnupuram, it is on sort of similar themes. On one hand, it tells the story of sort of the rise and fall of India. It is centered in a temple town. It's a temple town like, Kalahasti or Tirupati or Madurai or Kanchi or Ujjain. So it's a fictional town. So it tells the stories that happen in three time periods. But in that, there are individuals, human beings, who come to this town with a quest of trying to understand themselves, trying to understand life and death and relationships and the nature of time, why things happen the way they do. So just discovering an author in my own backyard who was thinking about such things was really mind blowing for me. So I had to understand his work better. So I think translating this novel is probably one step on that journey too.
That's nice.
Yeah,
When it comes to this book, The Abyss, you said in the foreword, quote unquote,
yeah.
I felt as if I was tasked with the equivalent of rendering James Joyce into Tamil. Were you referring to Ulysses?
Yes and no. I mean, it's not a direct comparison. The reason I used James Joyce is because at least in Ezham Ulagam, there is a lot of tendency to refer to very arcane uh, sort of ideas and images. For example, there are lines which come from film songs, for example, and then there's references to Siddhar Padal, Mangai Palunda Malai Melir Pork. So when things like that come into the Savana Pavak Bene, there's the first couplet that in the first lines in English I forgot, on the deathbed of sin, something like that, right? So that those couplets, they actually refer back to other couplets in the literature. So there's a lot of cross reference that's there in the cultural cross references that are there in the novel. So you have to understand each one of them in order to render it properly. Sometimes the jokes are about such very subtle things. So if you want to make sure that the joke gets across in English, you have to understand it first in the context in which it was written in, and then you have to find an equivalent way to render it in English, and then it has to be funny also. That's very hard. So
Now, this title of the book refers to seventh loka, Patala, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And then when I
yeah.
finished reading it, I thought it's actually referring to seventh rasa of Navarasa, that is Bibhatsa.
Oh, that's a very good connection. Yes, yes. This observation that this novel is built on Bibhatsa Rasa is something which in Tamil also other writers, critics have mentioned this. In fact, I have also written an article on this point. That it's very, because when Jeyamohan is primarily a classicist. So if you read his big novels, there is a sense in which each character, the arc of each character, is full and complete in itself, while the novel is a complete novel in itself. So it's like small circles in a big circle. So there's a sense of completeness in every little thing that you feel. Here though, and the hallmark of classical literature is, there is harmony and grace and beauty and balance. You have all these things. Here, it is very concentrated. The rasa is very concentrated. Even when you enter the novel, you are sort of the first, you feel a sense of repulsion almost, because it is so in your face.
First chapter was very difficult for me to complete.
No, that is what I meant when I said I think I was telling somebody yesterday. This novel presents a kind of almost a barrier. It's like an initiation. It's only the readers who get past the initial barrier.
See, when I read the
Mm,
forward, I thought I am
mm, mm.
completely prepared, right? I am set. But it took me some time for me to move from first chapter to the second chapter.
No, that is what I meant. That feeling you feel, right, when you finish the first chapter. This, I don't think it's for all readers. There are readers who will immediately keep the book away and go do something more pleasant, and okay, good for them. They don't need this book. But the reader who wants to go past this and understand what is this, what is happening here, what is, because at the end of that first chapter, he looks up at a star. The star is still there. It's a very stable thing that is there in the face of all this that is happening.
Yeah, if not for that star, that last couple of sentences, I wouldn't have moved on to the second chapter.
No, that is what I mean by classicism. That bringing it back. So what happens is a lot of writers who want to focus on some injustice, and I think it's fair that they are moved by the injustice in society. But then they go with a very broad brush, and then they just want to show it in all its goriness. And then they show the violence. They show the violence with my magnifying glass, so you see it in every level, and then you are completely overwhelmed, and you don't get anything out of it. But a classical balance is precisely this. When you place an incident like this in the larger canvas, what does it mean? And I think this novel, once you go past this, what happens is you're going further and further and further and further into the abyss. So it's almost like seeing our own world reflected upside down in a small miniature sort of a water droplet or something.
Yeah,
Everything is
yeah, yeah, yeah,
disfigured.
yeah,
If you know,
yeah,
you know what
yeah.
I'm talking about, right? When it's a reflection
Right.
in a convex mirror or something, all the images are distorted, so everything is exaggerated. But then what is there? Then when you start seeing it, you see the same things that is over here. So you see a woman who is so much in, she thinks
Correct.
that a man is
Correct.
her husband because
Correct.
he tied a tali around her neck. That is, and it is taken to its extreme. Everything is taken to its extreme, and it's also so funny. Like, I think your email said this, right? Like, this Ramapan, there's a character called Ramapan who has he has leprosy. So but he is so always looking at the women, looking at their toes. I mean, he's got a very aesthetic sensibility, but it's a pity that his fingers don't. No, that the point is when you come there and when you are able to laugh not just at them but with them, and that happens, then I think then all these differences go away. So that is the that is where the novel becomes something else altogether. It's very difficult to introduce a novel like this, Anil Garu. This is what I mean, right? Because it's not a novel about beggars, it's a novel about ourselves. That means calling ourselves as beggars.
You said it's very difficult to introduce this book to listeners. Now, please do the honors. Talk about the book, theme of the book, and your favorite characters that you really loved.
So the novel is called The Abyss, and it's by Jeyamohan, and it's a translation of a Tamil novel called Ezham Ulagam. And like you said earlier, Ezham Ulagam literally in Tamil literally means the seventh world or the seventh abyss. So in the traditional way they talk about the seven underworlds that exist: Adalam, Vidalam, Sudalam, and so on, and it ends in Padalam. There is the seventh, the deepest one, supposed to be a bottomless one too. So that is the name he gave this world, and in a way, it is what it is. We are the novel brings us face to face with a sort of a life that to our conception is really like somewhere in the depths, but it's actually there all around us. It is there all around us. These things happen all around us. But in any literary work is not a documentation. So it's not about, it's not a story where you can learn more about the lives of beggars. I don't think anyone reads literature for that. It's about, you have a certain sort of physical or a social phenomenon, and through that, what do we understand about humanity? What do we understand about ourselves? And if the novel can go into that, then it's a good novel, right? It's a literary work. And I think this novel is. I asked Jeyamohan this question in an interview, right? And he said one way he said it's like an acid test for a human being. You do a literary experiment almost. You dial it up. You take the suffering. You see, there is the maxim that all life is suffering. So you take that, and then you dial it to the maximum. You go to the limit. Okay, you take the suffering to the maximum. Dip human beings in acid almost. You see what remains. And I asked Jeyamohan, what did you find? And he said it's the same thing. Whatever is noble in a human being anywhere else in the world, you see the same nobility. You see people feeding each other. You see, you know, sort of transcending the narrow confines of your life through art and intellectual activity. You see human beings, joining with each other in bonds of love, which is outside any conception of blood or anything like that. So this is ultimately what is there, right? And for me personally as a reader, so in the book's arch, there are two stories in it. One is the story of Pothivelu Pandaram, who's a man, who's a god-fearing man. He's a devotee of Murugan, and he has a wife and three girls, and he's a very, very well respected member of his society. But then he also has a side business where he owns these human beings and trades them and makes them beg and ill treats them and all that, and he doesn't have any guilt about it. So that is one story, and what happens to him and his daughters and his domestic life. That's one thread of the novel. The other thread is the life of these beggars, and particularly one is Muttamai, who has a baby, and what happens in the space of 1 year when her baby is sold away, and what happens next. So that story, right? So there are two threads in the novel. But what we eventually come to is that they are not so different after all. There are these two threads, but they are actually mirroring each other in such astonishing ways. And at some level, when we follow these two characters, we find ourselves in both. Finding a beggar in oneself is very shocking, but finding Pandaram in oneself is even more shocking. So I think that is where the novel will bring you to. And like I said, it's not for all readers, but if you are the kind of reader who can make yourself go through this process, you will be much, much, much richer as a human being at the end of it. I feel that is my takeaway as a reader.
Yeah, yeah, true. See, what really shocked me about this Pandaram is he can seamlessly move from being a complete rogue to being a very, very devout husband and compassionate, loving father, and all that in a second.
We are also like that. We are also like that. It's an uncomfortable truth, but we might not go as far as Pandaram. We might not both in our sort of indifference to other human beings, or in our love. We might not go in the middle of the night to buy bangles for our daughter. That extreme also we might not go. But both are there. So that is a very sobering realism, but that is, I think, one of the things that the novel teaches you.
See, the best, part about the whole novel, where I really enjoyed it thoroughly, is that Vandimalai and Madhav Perumal, no, they will be carrying this Muttamai up the hill, right?
Uh,
And parallelly, the other people who are walking with them up the hill,
mm,
and these are devotees carrying
mm,
that
mm.
kavadi. In Telugu, also we call that kavadi up the hill with puja offerings. But these two fellows, they are carrying Muttamai. I believe that's a really remarkable writing, right? It's beautiful actually the way he depicted the whole scene.
It was one of my favorite places too. The way the evocation there, it's so natural, it's so part of that scene, but then it just hits you when you realize that they are carrying this woman like they are carrying the kavadis, and then it hits you there. You're correct. It's a very brilliant place, and I'm happy that you noticed something like this. And you're one of the first readers of the book, so I'm very happy about that. There is one thing there, when I was talking to Jeyamohan after having translated the novel we were talking about, Murugan temples or the Pandaram culture, and about Siddhar Padal and all that. Then we were talking about Kavadi, and he told me the history of how the Kavadi evolved. So today, the Kavadi that you see, they are very lightweight things, and lightweight wood it is made. So it has a base in the middle, and then that arch-like thing, right? So it's very light. But in the earlier days, it used to be quite heavy, and in the beginning, it was basically like a beam balance. So you would hold it on your shoulder, and on one side, it will have a plate where you will take offerings for the god, and on the other side, you will take where it is food for you for the journey. So it's two things, two plates, one for you and one for the deity, almost. the fact that these two men were carrying this woman, where she is, in a sense, it's almost like they are carrying a religious, sort of, they are doing a religious penance themselves by carrying her. All the goodness that the punyam that the other people would have got by taking the kavadi, they are also in a way getting it, and that really makes you go really. It's a very disturbing feeling inside. Uh, you know, um, rupture something inside you. Yeah.
That reference to that song, Panivilu Malarvanam. Initially, when I read it, I was wondering why he mentioned this. It's one of my all-time favorites from Ilayaraja. But later I thought probably he's referring to those ridiculous dance moves in that film. Then I thought maybe he's referring to the play of God.
I think it's a very subconscious sort of a feeling. For me, that song, I mean, I only listen to it. I don't have very strong memories or nostalgia associated with that song. But I could, why was he thinking of that song whenever he was thinking about his daughter? I think he just felt like, yeah. And now that you tell me, maybe that is why, because the song is so beautiful and so, dreamy and like humming, like, and the movements are really like, outlandish and sexy, and it's very, it doesn't gel at all. And I think for Pandaram's, his view of the world was also like that, especially when you think that it was because, he was thinking about his daughter. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know. But I don't know if it's also worth really reconstructing it, because it's, for me, that the memory of the song in that line is, like you say, it gives me more than if we try to intellectualize it.
I think you should ask Mr. Jeyamohan about it. I would love to hear his answer. And recently I watched a film, Nambagal Nerathumaikam, Lijo Jos Pellicheri, right? Though it's a Malayalam film, there are a lot of Tamil songs, and that gives a context to the scene that is going on. In the final chapter, again, he talks about Nana Vittal, the Nadandu Vittal song.
Yes, yes. So that is a translation choice which I did to preserve the lyric. I didn't translate the lyric, or I didn't just gloss over and say that they were listening to some Tamil song. No, I think that song, that Na 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 Ittal. If you listen in YouTube or something, if you see the video, in that MGR will have a whip, okay, and he will crack the whip. So the song is not so much a song as the crack of a whip. That is, it is, when I watched that song when I was a very small child. And for me, it was like a very powerful message that, if somebody cracks a whip, that means it's like, a lion hearing a whip crack. Okay. So that there is a definite message of that, this will win in the end. And for me, that whip crack, I hear it in that song. And for me, that the novel actually ends on a very positive note, because there is that in Tamil we say Aanithanamana. There is this very sure end to it. But again, all this is a very subconscious connection you make, because music is very, very. No, it's not something which we can pin down with words or say that this is the definite meaning or this is the intention with which the author put it in. I don't know. And honestly, as a translator, I thought just preserving the name of that song that they heard, so that somebody can Google it, somebody can find their own meanings, is what is important. So I just put it in English words. I just said na 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 ita. Many songs are there. Many songs are referred in the novel. Another one is a Malayalam song. It's Ramapan will sing that. It's called Akkarayanende Tamasam Ikkarayanende Manasam. That is also a very popular Nazir song from the 60s or 70s. So I didn't know this song at all. And when I was reading the novel, when I was translating the novel, I found it. And there was, that novel, that song now has also now become part of this novel's landscape. So many strange things like that. I think it happens when. So it's like, it's an aesthetic choice. Why should a novelist bring music into the novel, right? And I think by doing that, they also change the meaning of that song. So now those songs have become part of second landscape for me. So you understand what I'm saying. So those songs, meaning of those songs have now become much deeper. They are also images around us which the novelist is using. So
And the way he ends with Mangandi Swami singing again, he ends it beautifully, the novel. In fact, that character is very, very, it's an enthralling character.
Mangandi Swami is not from any world that we can readily have a reference to. We can readily understand. He when he was part of the beggars, he was not opening his mouth. He was not begging, but he was singing. And I think his singing is it's a very divine trait. It shows that he was at home, he was comfortable, and he was just expressing, he was just creating, he was just being. And but you put him in in another kind of surroundings, you torture him, you make him sing those songs. Those songs are not for other people, I think. And then when he was begging, it was not that he was begging for his life or something. He was begging as an insult. He was throwing it in their faces almost. So he was that is, I think, that is his power. That is where he is more powerful than anybody else in the novel, including the people who owned him, quote unquote, who were wielding power over him. So I think that the whiplash that I talked about in that song, it belongs to the world of Mangandi Sami. He's a very, yeah, he doesn't have arms, he doesn't have legs, he only has a voice, but it is a whiplash.
So now, when it comes to the process of translation, right? How much time you took to translate the whole novel, and tell us a bit about editing and any specific inputs you received from Sri Jeyamohan.
I took 4 months to translate the novel, and some of I had to ask my friends for help with some of the words that were very local to, sorry, Malayalam or Kanyakumari Tamil. So that I had a couple of friends whom I consulted. But no, I did not discuss it with Jeyamohan till I finished the whole translation. Then I spoke to sir. So I asked him for about 1 or 2 hours time to clarify some questions where I thought the author only could answer them. And it was at that time I was asking him about his travels in when he was 20 years old, what he saw, and how all of that influenced the writing of the novel and all that. So some of that made its way into the interview also. But that I think Jamon is also very hands off when it comes to translation. I think he trusts the translator. He doesn't give a work to a translator, I think, till he trusts them. But then the process, it's very independent process, and for me that really works. I don't think I can work with an author, and because I think that translation itself is a sort of very intense reading. You work with the text, and you internalize the text, and then you try to mirror that in English. So that's a very personal sort of a process.
This particular book, there's a lot of detail about cultural practices. Those which are described are very, very specific to that region, right? And what was your approach, basic approach for this translation? Was there any specific approach how to go about it? Because you are talking to English readers.
For me, there were two steps, right? One is for myself to understand what I'm reading in its entirety. Now, when we read a book, sometimes we think we understand something, but our mind actually skips over that. We don't understand every word very deeply, and we don't go and understand the word meanings or the root meanings of the word or the specific cultural context in which that word occurs. So when I read Pothivelu Pandaram, I say, okay, it's the name of a character. And then I say Pandaram, okay, maybe it's the name of a caste. Over that, I don't think so much about it. But when I'm translating, that character has to become real. It's a very fleshed out character. So I should know everything about the character, even if it doesn't end up in the language of the novel, right? Even as a translator, I think that level of intimate knowledge of that world you are building is important, like a novelist will have. So then I basically did that. I started to write a draft in English, and wherever I felt okay, I needed to understand something better, I would go and ask somebody about it or read about it, or and then I would come back and start writing it in English again. things like, for example, this Murugan temple worship. Why was Murugan the central figure in the novel? That was a question which, as a reader, it was maybe my subconscious knew it before I did, because I also grew up in a Murugan worshipping town. So that maybe it was there inside me, but I had to know it. I had to articulate it for myself. Then I went into the word root of Murugan. Muruga means Alagu. Muruga means beauty, right? And he's a very graceful god, always known for his personal beauty. But then in Parani, where the novel is set, he's a beggar. But he's in a temple that's built on a top of a hill, and all the beggars are saying that it is made of gold. So it's a very paradoxical kind of thing. So I felt, but for me, all this came together when I was contemplating on this child that is born to Muttamai, right? A small child. And it is very normal in households when the small child is born to say he looks like Murugan, he looks like Kannan or Krishnan. So those two gods specifically, they are always compared. That beauty of the form in the child form, they are always compared to both Murugan and Krishna. So I realized, okay, this is where it is. That is why it is Murugan. It is referring all those influences I felt should be communicated in English, for that image to really communicate in its depth. And you can't do it in a didactic way. You can't teach the reader. The reader will be bored out of their mind, and it's not a good translation. So you have to fold it into the text also. So it is, you find ways to do it, and you do it. So that is how I did it, I think. I wanted to really communicate the ethos and the culture in which the book is set, because that is what the author is also trying to work with.
You read this novel 10 years ago, right? First time. And now you have translated it. And translation means it's a very intense form of reading. So, was there any change in your perception about the book?
When I read it for the very first time in 2015, like I said, was disturbed. I think I was one of those readers who read the first chapter, and I felt, oh, this is very strong. It's like, I'm not very disturbing. I'm not sure if I should go on. But then I usually finish the books that I pick up, so I finished it. And I think a lot of it went over my head. I didn't completely process that book, so it was just something I filed away in the back of my head. Jeyamohan has written many things. Maybe this book is not for me, I thought, and I just filed it away. But then when I read it in 2021, right before I picked it up for translation, like I said, I suddenly understood what this book is about. It's about, it's very, I think the language, the metaphors, everything communicated to me the essence of the book. But honestly, but even then, I thought it was a book about darkness. It's a book about a very gritty thing. It's about a very sort of existential, the mystery at the heart of existence itself. The fact that we keep making forms, we keep making when we create, we are creating not just beautiful forms, but we are also creating misery. So I thought that was where the book was trying to go. But then when you actually rewrite a book, or when you translate a book, you are living in that world. You are living a life. And for me, like Jeyamohan says, what came out for me after that was only a kind of sort of a bliss, and it is just. I think there is a catharsis in going through something like that. In real life, we will not have such extreme experiences, of course. This book, I think it does that. It takes us to the limit of suffering, but it shows us ways in which our humanness comes up again and again and again, and that even in the cycle of sort of suffering, liberation is not that far away. It is actually very, very close. That feeling and when I say there is that whip crack at the end, and then there's this ultimate hope in when Kuyan is so happy when he gets his feast, when he's licking his fingers and smelling them, saying, I don't want to wash my fingers because that smell it changes the way you see you feel about things inside. So I think that is that journey is very, very important, and it's I think that is the only way I can also engage with literature. For me, literature is not a frivolous thing. It's not something I read because I want, like I said, it's not about wanting beautiful style or language, or wanting to see what kinds of language games a writer can come up with. It's about things like this. So I wouldn't say all readers have to be so intense, but if you are a reader who has that sort of a thing, then I think this novel is for you. That's how I would say.
Can you tell us briefly about this Molly Spaces, a platform that you created along with Priyamvada Kumar, who is incidentally the translator of Aram's stories? I must tell you, truly loved reading that book. You know, it's really nicely done.
Priyamada is another brilliant translator working out of Tamil. She translates into English. I hope you get time to talk to her also
Yeah,
sometime.
we will.
She recently won the Penheim Award for, it's a very prestigious translation grant, also for Jeyamohan's work. It's called White Elephant. So she's translating that work right now. Um, so Priyamada and I, we got to know each other in 2017. And after that we kept in touch. But then when we started translating Jamon's works together, we started talking to each other, consulting each other on various translation problems, things like that. And if any specific sentence trips us up, we would talk about it. Language, we compared notes. And eventually, I think both of us sort of have a shared passion for serious literature. And we both have this feeling that regional literature is not represented as well as it needs to be in the English language landscape. And when people talk about Indian literature, there is this immediate thought that it is Indian literature written in English, while Indian literature, I don't think the English language is necessarily poor in any way, or there's not good literature written in English or any of that. But I think that this perception is just a historical artifact almost. It's a 25, 30-year-old historical artifact to think that Indian literature is literature written in English. So I think that needs to be set right. And I think as translators, it's part of our sort of duty to do that. And I think that when it comes to literature, readers, when I say readers, I mean the Sahridaya, the shared heart kind of readers who understand the pulse of literature. They exist in all kinds of places. They are there. I know readers who read only in Tamil, who don't read a word of English or any other language, but they are absolutely fine readers. They are the people to whom the writers write to whom the writers are yearning to talk to. And then writing also shapes the intellectual culture of an age. How intelligent we are and how perceptive we are, how many new ideas we can come up with, actually changes how idealistic we are, how humanistic we are, and our place in the world. And all those things need an overhaul. So we thought that at a pan India level, these conversations need to happen. We need to find similarly passionate readers in other languages. And finding Harshaniam was just like amazing for both of us, because this is pretty much what we want to do out of Muri, and you're already kind of doing it. So this spirit is what we want to embody ourselves. We call it Muri. Muri means language. In Tamil, Muri means language. And the reason we call it Muri is this letter Ra that exists in Tamil and Malayalam. It's a letter, where the tongue folds back into the mouth, but it doesn't really touch any part of the mouth. So it's the sound that is produced without being attached to anything, and it's a sort of non-attached, this sort of sound that we are looking for, something that is not grounded in a single language, but it is common to all language. Yeah.
Yeah, can you please tell us about your future projects and projects that you're working on?
So now, at the moment, I have two more novels lined up to translate, both by Jeyamohan, and both are very important novels. One novel is it's called Kumari Thurevi. The name of the novel is Kumari Thurevi. The tentative English title is The Daughter of Kumari, but I might change it later. So the premise of the novel is very interesting. So in the 13th century, 14th century, early 14th century, Madurai, right? Madurai, where I'm from, was for a very brief point of time, it was in the hands of the Delhi Sultans. And after that, what happened was the Nayaka army came in, and it became a feudal state of the Nayakas. The Nayakas took over Madurai, and they ruled over Madurai for almost 300 years after that, almost until the British came. So this came about as because there's a very strange story about it that in Vijayanagara at that point Harihara and Bukka they founded the empire and Kumara Kampana was the general. His name was Kumara Kampana. He was a general, and his wife, her name was Gangamma, and she was a poet. So one day, as the story goes, the goddess Meenakshi came in the dream of this Gangama and told her, you need to send your husband to Madurai because I've been exiled from my land. And because of the Sultanate's rule, and the temple has been razed down. So you need to restore me to my temple. So you need to tell your husband to wage war on them and restore my temple back to its glory. So she conveyed the dream to him, and he invaded, and that is how the Nayaka rule came to Madurai. That is a very popular story, and they brought Meenakshi back to Madurai. So this story, Jeyamohan weaves it into a very sort of otherworldly kind of tale. So he sets the tale in southern Kanyakumari district. It is called Venad, and based on one sort of it's just one line that he read in a history text somewhere that during the time when the sultans were ruling in Madurai, the idol of the goddess Meenakshi had been taken away from Madurai, and it was housed in a small temple in a place called Aralvaimozhi in Kanyakumari district, in this Venad kingdom. So she had been kept there for all this time, and finally, when the Nayakas came back, and when they took over Madurai, they wanted the goddess back, and the king of Venad, he had a hard time letting go of the goddess. This is all in the novel. This is not historical, but this is the premise of the novel. So the king of Venad had a hard time letting go of the goddess because she had come to his land, and you don't let go of a goddess who has taken residence in your country. So this became a very big problem. And then the king resolved it after getting the advice from a wise person, he resolved the problem by agreeing to a wedding. So if the Nayakas would come with Shiva, then he would give Meenakshi in marriage to them as his daughter and send her back. That is the only way that she can leave his kingdom while not damaging anything for him, because you can't let go of a goddess otherwise. So this whole story is built on this premise of a king who gives away a goddess in marriage and sends her away. So it's a story of a wedding. It's a historical novel. At the same time, there is an element of mythology in it. There is an element of sort of a very psychological father and daughter relationship in it. It's a very, very, very unusual kind of work, and it is entirely filled with a feeling of auspiciousness. And it's even though it's about gods and goddesses, I think it's also about human beings. I think there's a line in his foreword where he says, "If gods can play with human beings, then can't humans also play a little with the gods?" That or the other way, if humans play with the gods, then can't the gods also play with the human beings? It's a very sublime story. It's a very small novel, and translating that is another challenge. But I'm working on that at the
Yeah.
moment.
What is the other book? You said two books you are working on.
The other book is an early novel of Jeyamohan's called Vishnupuram. I was just talking to you about it. The big fantasy novel. Yeah,
Yeah, very good. Very nice to hear that.
yeah.
When is this first one coming out?
The first one, I'm still working on the translation. It is actually uh, it's a very small novel. It's in terms of the number of words and number of pages or whatever. But getting its emotions and its language right in English is one of the hardest things I've done.
Can you briefly take us through your association with South Asia Speaks? Sorry.
So I was part of this fellowship program called South Asia Speaks for 2022. It's a program that was only, I think it was in its second year at that point. In the first year of its journey, Priyamada, my fellow translator, she was a part of that program. So what that program, it was started, I think, by Sonia Valerio. She's a writer. and maybe others. I'm not entirely sure, but it's a very good program. It's meant to identify writers and translators from South Asia, and mentor them. Because in the worldwide arena, a lot of writers who come out of Europe or America, they come out of literature programs, MFA programs, so they have an understanding of the publishing industry and things like that. I think the publishing ecosystem is very different here in India in English, and a lot of writers don't have, or translators don't have access to that kind of networks. So I think it really helps to you get to work with a mentor for a book. And in my case, I it was me and six other translators. We were working with Arunava Senha, one of the most prolific translators working out of India today, and he's really a master at it. And he really helped to sort of identify some questions I had. With translating the abyss, and help to fine tune it. So, and my cohort was also like, I was working with some, alongside some really good translators in my cohort. So all that was very helpful. And I think it also exposed me to sort of how English language publishing works. It's a very different world from what I know from Tamil. Maybe I think it's also true for other regional languages. But these are all questions which I'm also kind of contemplating at the moment. At the same time as I'm doing this interview, there is a Tamil magazine called Neeli. It's a magazine focused on women's writing, but they are interviewing me as a translator. And one of the questions that they are asking is, why is the English media publishing, like, why is the English publishing world seemingly so focused on promotions and marketing and things like that? Everything seems to be a product to sell, whereas there is a lot of idealism still left over in literature in Tamil and other regional languages. And that's a question I'm pondering over. I don't know the answer to that, but I think even things like this, like South Asia Speaks, I think it brings together a lot of different kinds of writers and translators. Those conversations need to happen. I think we need to talk more about literature, write more about literature, and but that is when we will develop our sensibilities and make something original, truly original. Yeah.
Jeyamohan, dedicates this book to Jayakanthan. Why do you think he has done it?
Jayakantan is another. I think I mentioned him in the list of writers who personally personally important to me. I mentioned Jayakantan's name. He's not just a writer. I think he's just a phenomenon. He's a force by himself. Very few writers are there. When we think of an intellectual is one who lives by his mind, and they work by their ideas. And often we find that the lives they lead and the words they speak need not be the same thing. They may say one thing and their life may be very different, and that's okay. Sometimes an intellectual ideas outstripes the reality of his or her life. But Jayakantan was one writer whose life and whose words, whose ideas, I think were not that different from each other for the most part. So that sense is something you get with very very few writers. Then he was a writer who was always, he was one of the people, and he wrote as one of the people. So very very grounded sense in his writing, but he was a very spiritual man. And his spirituality did not come from the sky, it did not come from outlandish pronouncements. It came from the lives around him. His observation is just out of the world. So he observed the life around him so much, and he saw the spirituality in every man, woman, child, and animal around him. So that it's like I said, I came to reading because I think I was seeking writers like Jayakant, and that is, and I know what Jayakantan is not just popular today. No, he's been popular for almost three generations, especially among women. It's a very strange thing, and I have always tried to understand why. Uh, my family, in other families, there's no boundary of caste, no boundary of region. If you read Tamil, if you have led a life as a Tamil woman, you somehow, and if you're a reader, you somehow take Jayakantan seriously. It's just something I've observed. So these and all these features of what I just described. have been inherited to a large extent in this particular novel by Jeyamohan, I think, in The Abyss. You know, there is a short story of Jayakant, and I'm not sure if you have read it. It's called Nikki. This is a very celebrated short story by Jayakant, and it's a life of a dog. It's a life of a dog. So, there's a dog that gives birth to five puppies, and the mother dies, and all the puppies are cute, so they are taken away by one or the other people in that slum area. In a slum area, in a rainy season, the pups are born, and only one pup is there which has a sort of a broken leg, and nobody wants it. So that pup, it has to make its way alone in the world. So it's a short story. It traces how that pup, it goes out into the world, and it's so dirty that nobody wants to have anything to do with it. And the women, it goes and finds shelter in a house, and the woman kicks it out into the mud again. And it's so tiny that it's not even able to find food for itself. Then eventually it learns to find food. And then in a rain, it becomes suddenly its coat becomes shiny, and a little girl takes her in and calls her Nikki. And so now she has a name, and now she has a owner. But one day, she, due to some accident, she runs away from that house, and she's never able to find that house again. So, her life just continues like this as a dog on the street, eating what she finds, growing on pretty much on human waste. Whatever human beings find as waste and they throw it away, she eats it, and she grows big and strong. And then one day, she sees another dog and mates with it and has five puppies in a slum. And because now she mated with a dog which is from a high class or a pedigree dog, all the pups are so pretty that the people come and take the pups away, and the mother is now left alone to carry on with her life. That is the story. And the way he describes the dog's movements, it's yearning for affection, and the way it moves with human beings, the way it moves with other dogs. That observation is what makes that story classic. So by just telling us the travel of a dog's life, he's able to make us look at what life means. So that sort of detail. That is what I mean when I say books. Stories can have this redemptive outlook. That this tells me something about sort of my own life, I suppose. Again, right? So this novel, the reason I mentioned the short story is Abyss in many ways is very close to that spirit, you know. And in all ways, I think Demon has drawn on his own experiences, but to the same extent, he's standing on the shoulders of Jay Kantan when he writes this novel. And this is my opinion as a reader. I feel that this novel in every way it is worthy of being dedicated to Jay Kantan. And in translating the novel, I feel like okay, this is something that has now flowed through me also. So I'm very happy about it. And in that sense, it's a very redemptive sort of work.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. This, like I said, the podcast that you're doing, introducing literatures from all over India to your readers in Telugu. This is amazing, and if English is a strange language that somehow we're all talking in, but if this is probably the only way that we can find other sort of great thoughts that's happening in our country. So I'm happy if I'm able to find some readers through your podcast. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed the conversation and wish you all the best.